and Chloe, I'm going to pronounce it correctly, Soule, who is going to be our student moderator. This is the first time she's student moderated, but she's an accomplished competitor. The team just came back from Corpus Christi, where they got first and second place in video news production, first place in career pathway arts AP cluster, a gold and a silver in broadcast news technical test, and a bronze in the camera operator test. So these young people are really doing great things, and I think the national competition is in Atlanta in June, if I recall correctly. So this is just exciting, and we really appreciate them putting this on. This is being live streamed on YouTube, and we shared it out on Facebook. Hopefully it's gotten out elsewhere so people who can't be here or hopefully being able to watch online. So with that said, I'm going to pass it over to Ms. Chloe, and she's going to run the show. If you guys have any questions, I do have cards. Please write them down and bring them to me, and I'll get them over to her. And Michael is on his way. We'll just shoot them in the middle whenever he shows up. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you guys for coming out. So I'm just going to read the rules so everyone's clear. Each candidate will be allowed 3 minutes to make an opening statement. Each candidate will be allowed 2 minutes to answer each question. The order will be rotated, hopefully providing each speaker at least 2 opportunities to speak first on a topic. A timekeeper will be marking the 30 seconds with yellow, 15 seconds with orange, and 0 seconds or stop with red for the time remaining to answer questions. Times will be closely adhered to, with sound controllers cutting the mics off at moderators and timekeepers' directions. Candidates will be seated 3 across with 2 wireless microphones, which will be handheld. You are requested to return the microphone. It's fine. There will be no crosstalk. You're speaking to the audience. If a speaker's response mentions another candidate, that candidate will be afforded up to 1 minute to respond. Candidates will be allowed 2 minutes to make a closing statement. Sound good? Are we starting? Okay, so our first question we'll give to candidate Beck. You'll start, or have the microphone, so Ms. Candidate Stewart. What do you feel are the top 3 responsibilities of a council member? That's for you, yes.
I think the biggest responsibility of a council member is to listen to the needs and the wishes of the communities and be there to represent what the communities want. And so we have to be out in the communities talking to our constituents, and we have to have, and responding to their questions, whether they're by phone call, email, or in person. And we have to have an open door policy to be meeting with our constituents on a regular basis so that we can know what is going on, what are the issues that are affecting our communities. And then the 2 next things are, and this is the responsibility of city government, infrastructure and public safety. And we have got to be making sure that your neighborhoods are maintained, that your streets are safe, that your infrastructure, your water is maintained, and we've got to make sure that you're safe, that your police and fire are funded and supported so that your neighborhoods and communities are safe. And I think that's the job of the city council.
And candidate Beck, you can respond to that as well.
So first of all, thank you for having us out today. It's really great to be back in the school that I graduated from, and 20-something years later, it smells the same. So the responsibilities of a council member, first and foremost, it is constituency services. Every day, the District 9 office receives dozens of phone calls and emails from residents asking for help. And a lot of times they just need help navigating the system, or they have a question. And so one of the biggest impacts that we get to have as a council person is those small things that help folks in our live better lives, whether it's their trash didn't get picked up or they've got a colony of stray animals down the street that they need help with. Being able to troubleshoot those problems for my constituents in District 9 is something that's, I think, incredibly important. And so to do that, you have to be accessible. It's why we make sure that someone is there to answer the phone and return those calls promptly, to answer those emails, to make sure that you are getting a response from your council person. Second, to be your advocate at City Hall. You deserve someone who's going to fight for you and what you need in the requests of your neighborhood, and that's your city council person. They take your desires, your wishes forward, and they advocate on your behalf. And then third, and I think incredibly important, is being a hawk of your tax dollars. It is so incredibly important to make sure that we are good stewards of your tax money. And so making sure that the city is doing the most with that we're being fiscally responsible, that our budget is right-sized, and that when we take your tax dollars, that we are being as efficient as possible, is the third role that I think is incredibly important for a council member.
Thank you both. So we'll move on to the next question. This one is sent in. So it says, economic development is occurring around Fort Worth. I love my neighborhood. However, I'm not sure the city is paying as much attention to improving and developing my neighborhood as much as other areas. If elected, what specific actions would you take to advocate on the behalf of Wedgwood in terms of economic development and neighborhood beautification? And I'll give it to you first.
Well, we've already put bond dollars into improving areas around Wedgwood, whether that's the Alta Mesa McCart intersection or your neighborhood streets. I am advocating fiercely, and I am calling on everyone that's in this room and listening online today to advocate fiercely with me as well for bond dollars to go into the Southwest Community Center, because it is in desperate need of a facelift. And so Wedgwood is important. You heard me say I went to Southwest High School. I graduated here. I grew up here in Wedgwood. Wedgwood is not forgotten. It's one of the older or aging areas in our city, and it is ripe for redevelopment. So as we have opportunities, right now they're maybe seen as, blighted areas, but they're opportunities for growth. And so when we have our commercial intersections like the McCart and Alta Mesa corridor or the Wedgwood Square corridor, making sure that the city is investing in those when the right developer comes to revitalize that is incredibly important. We're not done with Wedgwood. We've added lighting to Krause Baker and Little People Park, and we continue to work with our neighborhood leaders to advocate for the behalf of Wedgwood every day.
Is that on? Did that work?
There we go.
Okay, as a small business owner myself, I understand both the ways that the city can help and the ways that the city can harm our economic development. And the city has got to be easier to work with for our small business owners. So myself, when I was building my office building, it took me 18 months to get the paperwork done so that I could build an office, and only 4 months to build a building. So most people would have given up, or a lot of people would have given up. We've got to make it easier for community business owners to come into the communities. And right now, our tax base in the city of Fort Worth is 60% residential and 40% commercial. In a healthy, large city, that should be flopped. It should be 60% commercial and 40% residential. And if we can work with our community and be collaborative with our small business owners and our large corporations and attract more commercial, it will help Wedgwood, it will help the whole city, and it will help us get our tax base down, our tax rates down, because as our commercial increases, that takes a burden off of our residents. And so I want the city to be easier to work with for our business and our commercial.
And I'll just ask the question again for you. If elected, what specific actions do you plan to take or advocate for on behalf of Wedgwood in terms of economic development and neighborhood beautification?
Absolutely. So first of all, I apologize to everyone that I was running a little late. It's my bad. I appreciate all y'all's time coming out here. And what I would have to say is I believe a lot of the problems in Wedgwood are problems, that's occurring throughout Fort Worth. So that's a lack of infrastructure. So I actually live in the Magnolia Rosedale area of Fort Worth. So there's been a massive expansion of housing going into that area, and there hasn't been the infrastructure to keep it up. So we absolutely do need to invest in much greater forms of infrastructure for the train system, for the bus system, and everything like that. And that would absolutely include Wedgwood into those decisions. Additionally, there's been a massive amount of potential school closures as well. So I believe as an elected official, it would absolutely be one of my primary responsibilities to, although I can't necessarily, vote on certain decisions with school closures, I absolutely should put pressure on, people to get more funding for a lot of the schools out here. And these schools really are the backbone of our community, and we absolutely do need to take care of them at a much better way than we are currently doing right now. I mean, especially if you look at how it's been for the Texas government as a whole, they've been not nearly sending us enough resources for our schools. It's been about $5,000 that they're dedicating per student since 2010. That's essentially stayed the exact same. It's about $5,100 right now per student. So it's much too small. So not only would I want to add more infrastructure to this community as a whole with these infrastructure projects, but also I believe that we should, put that pressure on the Texas government, because everyone knows that school is getting more and more expensive, and we should, put the pressure on the Texas government so that they can actually, update that policy. And I believe there should be double the amount of funding going into schools, to be honest.
Thank you. So several Wedgwood schools are proposed in closing. What's your position on this? And you can start with that question.
Well, my position is that there shouldn't be any school closures at all. I mean, Fort Worth is growing rapidly. I mean, when you put money towards infrastructure projects, when you put money towards schooling, when you put money towards roads, when you put money towards the train system, the bus system, it's not just like we're wasting the money. It's going directly into, helping the community. It should be thought of as an investment. It's not just an expenditure that we're just doing needlessly. Ideally, there wouldn't be any school closures. But I think a lot of it comes down to, us as, a city not putting enough money towards schools, but also the majority of it just comes from the state. I mean, although we're, your elected officials for Fort Worth, we absolutely should be using our power to put pressure on the Texas government. I was talking about how the cost per student has essentially stayed the exact same throughout Texas over the past 15 years. And, we absolutely need to use our power. We're one of the largest cities in all of, Texas, so we need to work alongside other major cities. Dallas has the exact same problems, San Antonio, Austin, Houston, El Paso. We need to work with a lot of these other large cities to actually let the community know that this is the problem. The Texas government is not nearly giving us enough funding, and we need to actually put pressure to make change on that.
You can, candidate Beck, you can answer that one next.
So first, let me say I was incredibly heartbroken to see that J.T. Stevens, the best ever school in the Southwest USA, was on the list of potential school closures for Fort Worth ISD, because it's near and dear to me, because it's where I went to elementary school and I know what a gem it is. But I have to trust in my elected school board trustees in the same way that I hope that they trust in the elected representatives on city council to do what's best with tax dollars. And we know that funding is only going to be further impacted by these disastrous voucher programs that you see coming in the state legislature. And so Fort Worth ISD has to be smart with your dollars. And it's going to be a painful process, and one that is going to result in some decisions that make no one happy. But I do think we have to do what's best for student outcomes. And if student outcomes require our school district to shrink in size so that we can adequately fund those elementary schools that are thriving, then that's what we need to do for the community, because it really is, at the end of the day, about student outcomes. We're struggling right now with our literacy rate, and we know that we have to get that up. That's a workforce issue. It's not just a tug at the heartstrings because we want all of our kids to read, but it is a workforce issue, and if we don't get a handle on it in Fort Worth, we're going to be struggling. And so I applaud my colleagues on the school board for doing what is incredibly difficult, and that is knowing that they're going to go to the community. They're going to make many people angry, but they're doing what's right for our students. And sometimes you need brave, courageous leaders, and I think that's what they're doing with this realignment process.
Thank you. And you can pass the mic to candidate Stewart to answer that question.
So I think it's a shame that we are losing schools all over the city. And some of these schools have been jewels of our neighborhoods for dozens, close to 100 years. I also think it's a shame that our city is growing explosively, but our enrollment in our Fort Worth ISD is shrinking. And I don't see how that's happening. Well, I do see how it's happening. People are choosing other options besides the Fort Worth ISD because we know the ISD is not where it wants to be, where we want it to be. I think what the city council can do to help neighborhood closures of schools, to help prevent and possibly turn them around, is work on enrollment for our Fort Worth ISD. And I think we need to reach out to our private sector partners and pull in innovative programs that make our schools the first and best choice. If we're going to have school choice, let's make the Fort Worth ISD the first and best choice. And we're already doing this with, for example, the A&M campus and TCC. They are working with Lockheed, with Alcon, with American Airlines to bring in programs that make our workforce better candidates for our large corporations. And why are we not bringing this down into the K through 12 level? Let's get enrollment back up. But the last thing I want to see is your neighborhood schools that you've cherished for all these years scraped off and turned into, I don't know, mid-level, mid-rise apartment complexes. The city needs to be an advocate to turn this around.
Okay, thank you. Now that Michael's here, we're going to go back and let y'all do your 3-minute opening statements. So if you want to start, you can go ahead and do that.
Appreciate it. So what I have to say is over the past 20 years in Fort Worth and DFW as a whole, the DFW GDP has exploded over the past 20 years. Now we're around $750 billion for the whole entire area of GDP in DFW. Additionally, the population of Fort Worth is massively increasing. We're bound to hit probably 1 million people by the end of the year. And while at the same time we have, like what we're talking about right now, with all these school closures, we have a lack of infrastructure, we have a lack of a train system. We only have, a couple of stops that the train system does right now. So what I propose is we should actually be investing in our community. We shouldn't be, cutting any of these programs at all. We should be treating infrastructure as an investment and doing that so that we're able to, make these communities thrive. And one of the ways I would like to use your tax dollars much more efficiently is I believe we should cut back on the massive amount of privatization that's occurring right now in our infrastructure projects. So, I mean, you can just think of it, how it could be done with a pothole. So if you're in a city that actually has potholes, the projects for potholes privatized, what actually happens for that is it takes a much, much longer time. You have to get several different bids from multiple different companies throughout the city. So what I propose is we should actually use municipal corporations to do a lot of these projects much more efficiently. So what we can do with that is not only will these municipal corporations, get these projects done more efficiently, it'll be much less costly for the average taxpayer. And additionally, we can actually use these programs to actually provide high-paying jobs for the people of Fort Worth. Because right now there absolutely is an affordability crisis going on in Fort Worth, where people are not able to find jobs that are paying them enough money to survive. Their apartments continue to raise in cost. Their housing continues to raise in cost, and all of that is contributing to this massive level of just the homelessness crisis. I mean, out there in Magnolia and Rosedale, there's just more and more people that are losing their houses every single day. So what I would also propose is actually using a lot of the public land that we already have in Fort Worth, and then just trying to just build publicly owned housing to cut a lot of the profits that are currently occurring. Because a lot of I don't know how many of y'all are renters out here, but a lot of the apartments will just have 20% increases, 30% increases after just 1 year of the lease expiring. So they're not nearly giving enough regulations to protect tenants and just the average worker in Fort Worth. So I propose, increasing funding for infrastructure projects, fighting back on the privatization, and increasing funding for actually public housing as a whole and public jobs programs in Fort Worth.
Can you pass the mic to your right to candidate Stewart? Okay, and you can go ahead with your introduction.
Well, hi, I'm Jenny Stewart, and so I'm a fifth-generation native Fort Worthian. I've been a small business owner here in Fort Worth for over 20 years, and I'm a former chemical engineer. And I'm running for city council because I believe that every member of District 9 deserves to have a voice. And I want to listen to the voices of all of the members of District 9 and represent your needs. Now, in my career, especially as a chemical engineer, I had to spend my time solving tough problems, often as the only woman in the room. And I learned how to think critically, listen closely, and stand up for what's right. And as a small business owner, I have seen how working through city government policy can both help and hurt the people who are trying to create jobs, build our communities, and make our city a great place. Now, I'm also concerned about our environment, and especially our Trinity River. And as a longtime member of the Fort Worth Rowing Club, I'm actually out on the river all the time, and I've seen both the beauty of the river and the damage that we're doing to it. This is a vital natural resource, and we have got to protect our waterways. And a lot of our problems are coming from aging infrastructure. We've got to get ahead of these problems because some of these are causing permanent damage. And finally, we all know that Fort Worth is growing fast. And we have got, as your city council, we have got to be making proactive decisions and pragmatic solutions and meet this growth as it's coming to us. And I want to be your advocate in City Council for District 9 and for Wedgwood. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Beck. I'm a mother, I'm a lawyer, I'm a veteran, and for the past 4 years, I've had the privilege of serving as your councilwoman. Wedgwood is home for me. It's where I grew up. I graduated right here from Southwest High School, and I am running for city council to make sure that every child has the opportunity to succeed that I did. I'm pretty candid that my life here in Wedgwood was not the easiest. Both of my parents were drug addicts, and we dealt with all of the side effects that come with that. It wasn't easy. But a high school guidance counselor here looked out for me and made sure that I didn't slip through the cracks. I had friends' parents who made sure that I had clean clothes and a full belly. And it was people like that. It was the people of Fort Worth who took a girl from nothing and made her your Fort Worth City Council person. And so every day that I wake up and I serve as your councilwoman, I carry that with me, that every child, no matter what circumstances they come from in the city of Fort Worth has the opportunity to lead. And I know a thing or two about leadership. I spent 8.5 years in the Army Reserves, and a year of that deployed to Taji, Iraq. And there are two things that I can tell you I learned from the Army. And one, that's that leaders lead from the front. You have to be willing to take those risks, to step out, to be that strong advocate and that voice in front of your peers, to be that advocate that District 9 needs. And second is you fight for the places that you love. And Wedgwood is certainly a place that I love. It's where I grew up, from J.T. Stevens to Southwest High School. And not just Wedgwood, and not just District 9, but all of Fort Worth. And so when you elected me 4 years ago, I promised you that I would be your advocate at City Hall. And I have followed through with that promise. Together, we have built new pools. We have doubled down on affordable housing. We have increased street maintenance. We have responded to our street light issues with a faster turnaround time. We have added over 200 new police officers and 100 firefighters to your street. And we have taken the bold and courageous decision to take MedStar in-house to make sure that when you call 911, that you know that someone is a skilled person is showing up, and that you have the level of care that you deserve as a resident of the city of Fort Worth. It's why I'm seeking another 2-year term, because the work is not done, and because you deserve someone at City Hall to be that fierce advocate, that leader that's willing to step out in front and do what's right for the city of Fort Worth.
You can keep it. So we'll go back to our questions. Do you feel the new City Hall was a prudent investment? Why or why not?
Am I up first? Okay, so I was not part of the council that made the decision to purchase New City Hall, and they made that decision based on some promises that were made. I don't think that all of those promises were kept, and so I still think that it was a prudent decision. Even with the budget overages, it was still cheaper to buy that building and renovate it for City Hall's needs than it was to build a new building from the ground up. And the truth is that as the 12th largest city, we had outgrown our City Hall, and we needed a new space. And so by investing in that building, not only did we save resources by purchasing an existing building and doing the renovation within the walls of that, but we brought everyone together. We collapsed about 7 different locations all into one building, and we did that methodically through working with a consultant to not just say, well, Parks needs 10 desk spaces, so we'll put them on the 8th floor, but really, how does Parks work with other departments? How does Water work with other departments? What does the Fire Department do in Development Services? What does our City Auditor do? How do they all collaborate together, and how can we house them in a space that encourages that collaboration? You know, the one area at the city that we really could use some work on is breaking out of our silos and talking more to each other and collaborating more. And so I'm so excited about this new building because it really was designed internally to foster that sense of collaboration amongst employees.
I believe that it is a beautiful building, but I would be remiss to not admit that it does seem like a pretty stark contrast to how a lot of the funding is for infrastructure in the city. I mean, this is a multi, high-rise building that has marble floors, that has, giant ceilings. It just seems like it doesn't seem to me as the most affordable and cost-effective use of taxpayer money. I would say, if you look at a lot of these other cities, if you go to like Como, if you go to a lot of other, different areas of Fort Worth, there's a lot of areas that don't have a lot of infrastructure funding. They have holes that were, dug up for water maintenance that they just still haven't been able to fix. They have massive potholes in some of these neighborhoods. And I just see all this, all these infrastructure problems with, the whole entire city of Fort Worth. And then I see a building like that. And, maybe you can make it work financially. And, it does look like a good investment. But I don't think that's necessarily the best use of our tax dollars, and we probably should be, looking for more cost-effective ways. Because I don't mind, if I'm a city council member, I don't mind doing the work out of a shed if I have to. Like I would much rather that the taxable dollars go towards, investments towards just the average, working class person in our city than just like an expansive multi-story high-rise with marble floors.
So, of course, our new City Hall is beautiful. I was at the opening of the new City Council chambers, and it's gorgeous. But what I see the problem with in this City Council building is not the decision to purchase it in the first place, but the stewardship of the money during the construction project. So we bought a building and we didn't realize that there was no place for a council chamber inside the existing building. So oops, now we have to build a giant council chamber out on the side. And we get started with the plans on the new council chamber, and oops, it's in the floodplain. Nobody did a $4 floodplain check to find out that we can't build here before they started it. That ended up being a $10 million mistake. We lost $100,000, at least $100,000 of building supplies just during the construction. And I wonder who is watching our money. It may have been a great idea to build a new city hall where we can all work together more collaboratively. I think that sounds like a great idea. But I think our city does a whole lot of stepping over dollars to pick up pennies. And we need to be better stewards of our money. And I think that this city council building is a good example of that.
You can keep the microphone, and we'll go on to the next question. With potential budget cuts on the horizon, how will you prioritize funding across departments, and what strategies will you use to ensure parks and libraries are not disproportionately impacted?
Our parks are important, and you here in Wedgwood have got beautiful parks, but they need more maintenance. They need more help with litter pickup, because I actually came out and helped pick up litter a couple of weeks ago. Councilwoman Beck was there as well. But I've also heard from your community members that we're having problems with vagrancy, drug deals going down in your parks. This is a matter of listening to the community and prioritizing the resources to make sure our parks and our green spaces are maintained. And we have money that we can allocate toward this, but we need to allocate those resources. It's money, but it's also attention. We have to pay attention to what's going on in our parks. And your parks need to be maintained.
We should absolutely keep the quality of our parks and our infrastructure as close to it is right now, and we should absolutely be improving it at the same time. And I believe a great way to actually do so, even if we do spend less money on it, would be just bringing back and reeling back on the privatization that's going on with our infrastructure projects. It is very expensive. They talked about this with MedStar. MedStar used to be a thing in the city, and then now they're starting to do more of like a public option for that, and that's going to be much cheaper for the average person living out here in Fort Worth. The same exact thing goes for our infrastructure projects. So, you probably hear a lot of people talking about how, with highways, like if you continue to privatize this, a lot of times companies will get paid extra money, if they take longer for projects. So you just want to bring back on the privatization, and if you actually use municipally owned corporations, citywide owned corporations to do so that aren't privatized, what that actually does is it makes us use your tax dollars much, much more efficiently. And while at the same time we're using these tax dollars more efficiently and doing the same results as for y'all, we're also providing much better paying jobs for the people of Fort Worth, because there absolutely is a lack of high paying jobs out here in Fort Worth. And what we could actually use these programs to do is reinvesting in our community, reinvesting in the people that make Fort Worth, and that's the working class of Fort Worth.
So this year's budget's going to be tough, and I don't want to let anyone think otherwise. We are definitely feeling our belt tighten at the city of Fort Worth the same way that you are feeling your belts tighten at home. It's important that as we go through what will be a very difficult budget year, that we don't do so with Doge type efforts of just randomly slashing and cutting things. The cuts should be made with a scalpel, not a blowtorch. We need to be very thoughtful and mindful about what programs can be scaled back instead of just wholesale writing folks off. Now, when we talk about parks and libraries, they're often the first to get hit because people don't see them as a necessary service the same way they see police and fire or water and trash. But the truth is that just because they're fun doesn't mean that they're not vital amenities that you need to have a thriving world-class city. So without parks, without libraries, you have no place to recreate in the city. If you have no place to recreate, you have no place to relax. And you don't, it's a mental health issue. It's a quality of life issue. And so as we go through this budget, it's my promise to you to be that person with a scalpel and not a blowtorch, and to make sure that as we make those really tough decisions about how we move forward in the next fiscal year, we do show very measured and really look at each individual program, not just specific departments, because maybe some people don't find them as big of a necessity as others. But I would say parks and libraries, neighborhood services are all vital pieces of our city's government.
Thank you. Will you pass the mic once to your right? How do you feel about Austin trying to reduce local control?
Say it again.
How do you feel about Austin trying to reduce local control?
Local control.
Yes.
I would have to hear more about the specifics. I believe that it's very important in government, though, to have like grassroots approval from all the people of Fort Worth, and that's exactly why you should look into a lot of people's campaign funding, and you need to make sure that the people that you're electing are elected by truly the people, and not just the big donors and that sort of thing. So what I want to do is push for a lot of these programs that are a part of like maybe the Wedgwood community, whether it's east, south, or anywhere in Fort Worth. I want to make sure that these programs for these communities are approved by these communities first and foremost before we look to actually expanding these programs, because we're elected by you. We're elected to represent the people of Wedgwood, of Fairmont, of all over District 9. So we need to make sure that our number one priority is always the residents, and we're taking their concerns to the utmost importance.
So don't Austin my Fort Worth, right? Why do the legislators down in Austin think that they know better for our city than we know for ourselves? And I think it's legislative overreach for the state legislature to be making rules and laws that are only specifically for our city, our neighborhoods. They need to keep in their lane and let Fort Worth govern itself.
I have been campaigning on local control since 2020. Austin's overreach in our city politics has gone too far, whether it's not allowing us to dictate building standards, to trying to control our downtown PIDs. What we see Austin doing is trying to place their control, supplant their control over the will of the people. The farther down your ballot, the closer your front door. No one in your elected official chain knows the problems that you are facing as a resident more than your city council person. Not your state rep, not your congressperson, not your governor, not your president. It's your council person that you call when your trash doesn't get picked up or you've got a pothole. Austin should let us do our job, and they should let us advocate for our people. Before I was a lawyer, I worked for the Council of Governments, which is a regional planning organization. I have a master's in city and regional planning, and it really gave me, on a high level, the ability to see how different cities operate. And some cities took the stance 20, 30 years ago that they wanted to be a place for senior citizens to retire. And so they invested in that type of infrastructure. They invested in senior citizen community centers and in parks that were geared more towards recreating, as opposed to ball fields. Other cities took the exact opposite tact, right? They said, we want young families, and they invested in parks and infrastructure to bring young families. With local control being taken away, removes our ability as Fort Worthians to make ourselves unique, and it takes your voice away at the local level and gives it to people in Austin who don't know you and don't care about you.
How will you ensure your decisions are based on data and community rather than the loudest voice? And you can start with that one.
So District 9 is a very unique district. It goes from downtown Fort Worth all the way south here to Wedgwood. And what I often say is that District 9 has both the loudest voices in the room and the softest voices in the room. And so it's my job to make sure, as your councilwoman, it's my job to make sure that all of those competing interests are being addressed. It's easy to represent the loud voices because when something's wrong, they tell you. You don't necessarily have to worry about them because they know how to pick up the phone and call you. It's those soft voices that you have to really make sure you're listening to because they don't know how to access the system and they don't know how to reach out to you. So it's the job of a council person to go out and make sure that they're coming to community events, that they're doing things like this, that they're showing up at the garden club or the pet adoption places, rescue groups, to really understand what your residents need to be in touch. But also when you make those decisions, you can't make them out of emotion. Sometimes you make a decision that your residents don't like, but it's what's best for the district or what's best for Fort Worth. And that's when you have to take emotion out of it. And that's when you need a strong leader, a courageous leader that'll step out in front and say, I understand that this decision does not make you happy, but this is the best decision for the city of Fort Worth. And you do that through listening, collecting data, and following your integrity.
I believe first and foremost, we need to be more proactive with how we're listening to people out here in Fort Worth. So it's much easier to hear the people with the money to spend on lawyers. It's much easier to hear these people because they're able to, file lawsuits. They're able to do all these sorts of things to actually put pressure on the government. But we're elected by the people, not just the wealthy, but we're elected by all people in Fort Worth. And it's absolutely my primary responsibility to actually, help the working class of Fort Worth, because that really just makes up the majority of the constituents of Fort Worth. And a lot of these people don't have the time, they don't have the resources to actually, proactively be a part of our government. And that totally, makes sense. Like if your job isn't as an elected official, you're not going to be spending as much time being involved in the process if you're having, multiple kids and you have, just a busy job in your life. You have other priorities and other responsibilities to do in your life. So we need to be much more proactive in engaging with different communities. I know like the community out there in Southland Terrace, a lot of these communities are very disenfranchised. They have, massive problems with their infrastructure. They have massive problems as a whole. And we just need to make sure that we're listening to everyone in Fort Worth, not just the people that are able to go out of their way and make it known to us that there are problems.
Well, rather than saying exactly what the other two candidates said, because of course we need to be listening. And that is exactly why I'm running for city council, because I have really felt that many of the neighborhoods in District 9 are not being listened to. I know that Wedgwood feels ignored, and I know my neighborhood feels ignored. So we've got to have a city council person that is out there in the communities, that's listening, that has an open door policy. But the question was also about data. So as an engineer, I actually can understand the data, follow the data, and know what it means. And that is something that I can bring to the table as your city council person. As a small business owner, I've actually experienced the problems that we can run into when we have city policies that are difficult to work with. And I will be one of the only people on the council who have actually run through some of these city programs as a customer. So I know what it's like to work with the city. And I want to be your representative and your partner in making the city an easy place to work with, and making sure that your communities are as beautiful and as great as you want them to be.
How will you work to improve after-school activities and community events for K through 12 students? And you can start with that one.
Well, one of the things that I've already talked about is reaching out to our private sector and bringing in innovative programs that help make our K through 12 schools the first and best choice. And what if we reached out to, for example, Lockheed and said, hey, Lockheed, why don't you take the Southwest Pyramid and make that your project? Make it the best pyramid it can be. What if we reach out to American Airlines and have them take Eastern Hills? Alcon, why don't you take O.D. Wyatt and that pyramid and create programs where people want to bring their kids back into the Fort Worth ISD. And as far as after school, I actually have been exposed to a program that was really through the churches called Effie's House in the neighborhood I grew up in. And it was a coalition of churches got together and built a community center adjacent to the high school so that kids that didn't have access to a good place to go, they didn't have access to some place that they could go study, they maybe didn't have access to a place that they could eat or feel safe, and it was provided for them through a church program. And we could advocate for those kind of programs for all of the city of Fort Worth.
Am I going? Okay. So this absolutely goes into what we were talking about earlier with parks. We need to make sure that we're getting more funding going into our parks. And, people talk a lot about, crime going on in Fort Worth. And this is just a great way to make sure that, our younger generation of people growing up in Fort Worth are being able to be well adjusted in society. It's just making sure that they have activities to do, because, when you don't give people any activities to do, they end up doing things that they're, not supposed to do. So we need to make sure that we're, putting more funding towards parks. We need to try to put as much funding towards schools as possible. I know it can be very difficult with all these cuts and everything like that going into it. But if we can just make sure to prioritize, things like what she was talking about earlier, where we always, as a city, look to cutting libraries, look to cutting parks. If we can actually understand that these are the backbones of our community, and these help, not only our younger generation with, after-school programs, but it also helps, everyone as a whole. I mean, I was, when I was even younger than I am now, I used to play soccer out here in Fort Worth, and I believe that's a great activity. It's has very low cost, and we can just, use a lot of our publicly owned land that we have in Fort Worth to just have, just free areas for students to come after school, play soccer, play basketball, play, any sport that they'd like in there. I think that provides like a very valuable asset to the people of Fort Worth, and that really should be thought of as an investment, because a lot of people come out to Fort Worth directly because they want to have kids. They want to have, just areas to set their roots in. And if we're able to reinvest in, the children, the next generation in Fort Worth, then we're able to have a massive improvement in everything in Fort Worth.
So the question is, what can the city do to encourage K through 12? And I think the answer is easy. We have some of the most amazing after-school programs hosted by the City of Fort Worth and our Parks Department at our community centers. And so if we wanted to engage more students, the quickest way that the city can do that is by building capacity in our community centers to expand those after school opportunities, and not just for middle school children, but not just for elementary school children, but for middle and high school students as well. The CCPD does a lot of funding for after-school programs as it relates to crime prevention, and I support those wholeheartedly. I think we do a great job of funding those, but I think we have room to invest in and build capacity within the city infrastructure, and that's absolutely through our community centers and the amazing after-school programs that they already provide.
And our last question, what will your top 3 priorities be if you're elected? And you can start.
Me to go first? Okay. So my top 3 priorities. First and foremost, we have to make sure that we're addressing infrastructure. District 9 has some of the oldest parts of the city, which means some of our infrastructure is aging. And I'd like to think that concrete holds up as well as we do, but it doesn't. So we've got to get out there and make sure that we are investing in our infrastructure, that our streets are taken care of, that our water's taken care of, that our lights are taken care of, that you are proud of the city that you live in, and that you have safe, reliable, and resilient infrastructure. Second is homelessness. As we become a larger city, we inherit large city problems, and one of those happens to be homelessness. I'm incredibly proud of the work that I've done already on council to attack that issue, whether it be $5 million of federal funding for permanent supportive housing, or convincing the city to invest in a high-impact program that funds a group of people through MHMR to really get at the toughest mental health issues out on the streets and find those folks home. And then third is to be a good watchdog of your tax dollars. Times are tough. Inflation is hard. We feel it at the city too. You feel it in your pocketbooks. And so it's my job to make sure that we're doing the most with what you sent us, and really taking the city staff to task, and asking those hard questions, and making sure that we're doing the best with what we've got. And we haven't always done that historically at the city. And so that's why you need me there at City Hall, because you need someone to ask those tough questions and to get those tough answers. One of those happened to be our take-home car policy. When I asked the city if they knew where our take-home cars were going, they didn't. And when they did know, they found out that they were going to Pilot Point and Graham and Ennis. And so we wheeled that policy back, and that was all because you had a strong fighter at City Hall asking those hard questions.
Yeah, so we're the fastest growing large city in all of the United States. So we absolutely should be investing in infrastructure. So first of all, we need to invest much more into the train system, much more into the public transportation as a whole. I mean, that really is just an investment to our community. It provides amazing jobs for a lot of people, and it makes it much easier for people to actually go throughout the city. And even if you're not going to be using the public infrastructure yourself for the trains and the buses, it still helps with congestion. So if there's less people on the road, then you don't have to worry about the traffic as much. So in addition to that, there absolutely is an affordability crisis, and that's cemented by the fact that there's more and more homeless people, people losing their homes every single day. I live nearby the Magnolia Rosedale area, so that's like directly in the center of a lot of this crisis. So what I've seen is the cost of housing continues to rise more and more and more and more and more. So we need to actually be using a lot of our public land to build municipal housing units, which will be charged at a very discounted rate. So it's essentially net zero for our spending, but we're able to do it at a much cheaper rate than a lot of these companies are currently renting out for. So we're able to increase the supply of housing so that we can decrease the price overall, because it is much, much too expensive to live out here in Fort Worth. Additionally, I mean, we need to make sure that we're taking care of the Trinity River. I mean, I don't know how many of y'all go out to the Trinity. I'm sure probably all of y'all, because y'all live out here in Fort Worth, but it's a great river. But the problem is, I mean, if you look over the top of it, there's a massive amount of pollution in the river. I mean, I don't even want to swim in there. I don't know how many of y'all would ever want to jump in there, because it's just covered in oil. We need to make sure that we're keeping our city beautiful, because it's a great place to live, and we need to make it continue to be so.
Well, as a member of the Fort Worth Rowing Club, I've fallen in the Trinity River multiple times. But that's not really answering the question. The three things that I think are our highest priority are infrastructure. So our infrastructure, we have got to be maintaining our streets and maintaining our public and our private water pipes and our sewer systems, because we have dangerous chemicals leaching into both our water systems and into our Trinity River. And it is so important. This is a public health emergency. We have got to find the money to fix these aging galvanized pipes there's 32,000 of them in the city. We've got to, and we know some of them are leaching lead into our water systems. And our water department has been trying to find the money to fix these piping systems and have not been able to find it. They haven't gotten enough support. We, in 2022, we went to the federal government and asked the EPA for a grant, and we were turned down. So currently, we are trying to find funding from the Texas Water Development Board, but we have not gotten the money to fix this very important lead contamination issue. Secondly, public safety. We need to be supporting our police department. We are hundreds of officers short, and we need to be hiring, training, and maintaining our police force. And then finally, neighborhood integrity. We are growing so fast, we cannot let our development overtake the beauty of our most historic neighborhoods here in District 9.
I think that's it. Thank you for coming out. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And we have your 2-minute close for each of y'all, so you can start on the end.
To tell the truth, I didn't really practice a closing statement. So I will say that I think that large portions of District 9 are being ignored by our council currently. And I think Wedgwood is one of those areas that you are not getting the attention that you deserve from our city council. I think my neighborhood is also one of those areas that's not getting the attention it deserves. And I want to provide that attention to every member of District 9. Now, I've been a small business owner for the last 20 years, and I promise y'all that every phone call, every text message, every email that comes into my office is responded to, and it's responded to promptly. And that is the level of service that you need as members of District 9, and that's what I want to provide for you. And I look forward to serving you in City Council, and remember that my door is always open.
So as someone that comes from the younger generation out here in Fort Worth, I'm able to see the direct results of previous policies, and I believe it's frankly unaffordable for many people of Fort Worth to live. So as a city council member, my primary responsibility would be affordability out here in Fort Worth. People talk about the crime rate, but a lot of the crime rate is directly a result of it being unaffordable to live. It is essentially illegal to be homeless out here in Fort Worth. If you're sleeping out in the streets, it's illegal to do so, and as such, you'll be arrested. You can be sent in prison if you're sleeping in the wrong street, essentially. So my primary responsibility would be just focusing on affordability, focusing on lowering the cost of housing, increasing the supply of jobs out here, and mandating all our tax dollars that we spend on any private corporation, mandating that we're actually having their employees paid living wages out here, because it directly affects our community. And if these people aren't paying living wages, it just results in a much higher crime rate and a much harder climate for everyone out here to live in Fort Worth. So my primary responsibility would be for affordability, and addition to the actual policies I'd like to propose out here in Fort Worth. I believe it's very important for us to use our responsibility as one of the largest cities in Texas to actually put pressure out there on our Texas government, because the Texas government has been letting us down, whether it's with the school vouchers, whether it's with essentially defunding our schools by refusing to actually increase funding over the past 15 years, whether it's with refusing to enforce tenant protections. The Texas government has been falling short every single time when protecting the average working class member of our Fort Worth community. So that's exactly what we need to do as an elected official in Fort Worth.
Again, my name is Elizabeth Beck, and I've had the honor and privilege of being your councilwoman for the past 4 years. And so I'm asking you once again on May 3rd to send this Wedgwood girl back to City Hall to be your advocate, to be your fighter for your community. You can learn more about all of my policy positions at elizabethforfortworth.com. You can also sign up to volunteer for the campaign. We'd love to have you out. Again, I look forward to your vote on May 3rd. Early vote starts April 22nd, runs through the 29th. Please reach out if you have any questions. I have thoroughly enjoyed my time here with you tonight, and thank you for such thoughtful questions. And I look forward to continuing to serve as your councilwoman at City Hall.
Well, thank you all for coming out, and thank all the candidates for your interest in serving, for your history of serving, and we wish you all well in your race. I want to give special thanks and congratulations to Chloe, who did such a wonderful job, and to Michael Hanby, our wonderful timekeeper who kept everybody in line, to Western Hills, to Mr. Hadd, God, Southwest. I am sorry. Man, I don't know. Southwest. Well, it's got West in it. See, that's the problem. Yeah, whatever. For all of their great help and for all their success in the programs they have here. Those of you who are not aware of what goes on at this school, you need to figure it out because they really, really have a great program and some great kids. So thank you all very much. The candidates have tables out here, and they can visit with you for a little bit until you get bored or they get bored, and we're going to start tearing this thing down. So thank you all very much for coming.